Pastor D. Rob.
Hey, Pastor D. Rob. I have decided to give all of you who are interested, who want to watch this video, a reading of this book, Love Speech. It's one I wrote several years back. It has to do with the issue of homosexual sexual relationships. It is been out for a number of years. I think I wrote this in 2013, and yet the issues remain as serious now as they were then. I'm going to read chapter 1, the introduction, all that today. And if you're interested in more of it, let me know and I will continue reading the book. But for those of you who like to listen rather than read, this is for you. Love Speech. Copyright 2013 by David Robinson. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible New International Version. The reason I used the NIV for this book was because they have a pretty generous allowance for using scripture without having to pay. So that's why I used that. Let's start with the author's note. This book is not a research paper. It is a book on ethics. Many of the ideas I explore in this book have been spoken or written by others before. If these were new ideas, they would probably not be very helpful. Ethics is a study that has developed over thousands of years. Humans have always tried to discover and understand what is right and wrong. Some of these notions of morality have stood the test of time, and some have not. Many of the ethical ideas that have not performed well under scrutiny in the past seem to consistently reappear in the present in new forms. It is the job of those who care about morality to identify and refute these ideas in whatever disguise they may wear today. I have not attempted to follow these ideas back to their roots. If my failure to do so offends anyone, I apologize in advance. As you read, I want you to remember the reason I wrote this book. I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book because I love all people. This book is about love. What I have written may cause pain for some, but love sometimes must inflict pain to bring healing. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Proverbs 27:6. I know there will be some people who will not like what I have written, but please understand that I wrote these words with humility and with an intense love for the intended reader. I ask only that this book be read in that context, with the same level of respect, tolerance, and openness that you would ask of me if you were expressing ideas you thought important. I can only hope that those who do read this book read all of it. You may read portions of this book that make you angry, but if you finish the book, you will at least realize that my intentions are loving. I do not desire to harm anyone. I do hope that for some, this book will lead to peace, and for many, this book will lead to hope. Please remember, as you read, that I love you. David Robinson, on a beautiful spring day in Tennessee. The greatest commandment. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Matthew 22:34-46. For all my brothers and sisters who struggle with same-sex attractions, I love you. Love Speech. Forward. We cannot begin to analyze issues like the ones we will deal with in this book without understanding that ideas have consequences. Neither can we attempt to tackle any ethical question without understanding, whatever our conclusions may be, real people will be affected. The issue of whether it is morally right or wrong to engage in homosexual sex is now facing our society in a way that cannot be ignored. This issue is immensely divisive. It is immensely important. One of the reasons this question weighs so heavily in my thoughts is because one of my closest friends identifies as a lesbian. We will call my friend Cara. I love Cara and everyone else, warts and all, because of that love and my desire to write truthfully but gently to those who read this book. I think it is important to state something about someone who will be affected by these words before we get to the heart of the matter. Specifically, I want to state something about my beloved friend Cara. What I write about Cara is honestly and deeply held. In many ways, Cara is advanced. She understands much of the natural moral law, especially as it informs us about how people ought to treat others. Cara has a generosity of more than material charity, a true generosity of spirit that few others I know possess. One would be hard-pressed to find any person who Cara has befriended that would not assure you of his belief that Cara would climb mountains for him if the need demanded. This belief would be true because Cara is a true friend. She loves people. She is kind and accepting to those who may not find a friendly face from others. She is quick to forgive and slow to hold a grudge. She gives each person his or her due with encouragement and sincere respect. She would sooner be hurt than demand justice from those who would take advantage of her. She has her beliefs and opinions, and she is not too shy to share them, but she works to live at peace with others. Cara has been through a lot. Cara has been hurt. She has been hurt by me more than I would probably like to believe, and she has been hurt by others more than I can bear to consider. Through it all, she has shown a triumph of courage and class. Cara tries to be real. She is authentic even when dealing with those who are not. She gives the benefit of the doubt, often to her own hurt. Cara loves people. People also love Cara. She has so captured the hearts of others that I have seen them go to great lengths to help and care for her. I do not only speak of family members who have a natural tie to her, through blood or marriage, but of people who were strangers to her before she entered their lives. She has developed many friendships, true friendships. Cara is intelligent. Cara is creative. Cara is talented. Cara is a special human being. God has blessed Cara. Cara is my friend, and I love her very, very much. The Emperor's New Clothes. Before we begin, please read this story. It is an old story, but the truth it suggests is a truth we will see again in the following pages. Many, many years ago lived an emperor who thought so much of new clothes that he spent all his money in order to obtain them. His only ambition was to be always well dressed. He did not care for his soldiers, and the theater did not amuse him. The only thing, in fact, he thought anything of was to drive out and show a new suit of clothes. He had a coat for every hour of the day, and as one would say of a king, he is in his cabinet. So one would say of him, the emperor is in his dressing room. The great city where he resided was very gay. Every day many strangers from all parts of the globe arrived. One day 2 swindlers came to the city. They made people believe that they were weavers and declared that they could manufacture the finest cloth to be imagined. Their colors and patterns, they said, were not only exceptionally beautiful, but the clothes made of their material possessed the wonderful quality of being invisible to any man who was unfit for his office or unpardonably stupid. That must be wonderful cloth, thought the emperor. If I were to be dressed in a suit made of this cloth, I should be able to find out which men in my empire were unfit for their places, and I could distinguish the clever from the stupid. I must have this cloth woven for me without delay. And he gave a large sum of money to the swindlers in advance, that they should set to work without any loss of time. They set up 2 looms and pretended to be very hard at work, but they did nothing whatever on the looms. They asked for the finest silk and the most precious gold cloth. All they got they did away with, and worked at the empty looms till late at night. I should very much like to know how they are getting on with the cloth, thought the emperor, but he felt rather uneasy when he remembered that he who was not fit for his office could not see it. Personally, he was of opinion that he had nothing to fear, yet he thought it advisable to send somebody else first to see how matters stood. Everybody in the town knew what a remarkable quality the stuff possessed, and all were anxious to see how bad or stupid their neighbors were. I shall send my honest old minister to the weavers, thought the emperor. He can judge best how the stuff looks, for he is intelligent, and nobody understands his office better than he. The good old minister went into the room where the swindlers sat before the empty looms. Heaven preserve us, he thought, and opened his eyes wide. I cannot see anything at all. But he did not say so. Both swindlers requested him to come near and asked him if he did not admire the exquisite pattern and the beautiful colors, pointing to the empty looms. The poor minister tried his very best, but he could see nothing, for there was nothing to be seen. Oh dear, he thought, can I be so stupid? I should never have thought so, and nobody must know it. It is possible that I am not fit for my office. No, no, I cannot say that I was unable to see the cloth. Now have you got something to say? Said one of the swindlers, while he pretended to be busily weaving. Oh, it is very pretty, exceedingly beautiful, replied the old minister, looking through his glasses. What a beautiful pattern! What brilliant colors! I shall tell the emperor that I like the cloth very much. We are pleased to hear that, said the two weavers, and described to him the colors and explained the curious pattern. The old minister listened attentively, that he might relate to the emperor what they said, and so he did. Now the swindlers asked for more money, silk, and gold cloth, which they required for weaving. They kept everything for themselves, and not a thread came near the loom. But they continued, as hitherto, to work at the empty looms. Soon afterwards the emperor sent another honest courier to the weavers to see how they were getting on, and if the cloth was nearly finished. Like the old minister, he looked and looked, but could see nothing, as there was nothing to be seen. Is it not a beautiful piece of cloth? Asked the two swindlers, showing and explaining the magnificent pattern, which, however, did not exist. I am not stupid, said the man. It is therefore my good appointment for which I am not fit. It is very strange, but I must not let anyone know it. And he praised the cloth, which he did not see, and expressed his joy at the beautiful colors and the fine pattern. It is very excellent, he said to the emperor. Everybody in the whole town talked about the precious cloth. At last the emperor wished to see it himself, while it was still on the loom. With a number of courtiers, including the two who had already been there, he went to the two clever swindlers, who now worked as hard as they could, but without using any thread. Is it not magnificent? Said the two old statesmen who had been there before. Your Majesty must admire the colors and the pattern. And then they pointed to the empty looms, for they imagined the others could see the cloth. What is this? Thought the emperor. I do not see anything at all. That is terrible. Am I stupid? Am I unfit to be emperor? That would indeed be the most dreadful thing that could happen to me. Really, he said, turning to the weavers, your cloth has our most gracious approval. And nodding contentedly, he looked at the empty loom, for he did not like to say that he saw nothing. All his attendants who were with him looked, and although they could not see anything more than the others, they said, like the emperor, it is very beautiful, and all advised him to wear the new magnificent clothes at a great procession, which was soon to take place. It is magnificent, beautiful, excellent, one heard them say. Everybody seemed to be delighted, and the emperor appointed the two swindlers imperial court weavers. The whole night previous to the day on which the little procession was to take place, the swindlers pretended to work and burned more than 16 candles. People should see that they were busy to finish the emperor's new suit. They pretended to take the cloth from the loom and worked about in the air with big scissors and sewed with needles without thread, and said at last, the emperor's new suit is ready now. The emperor and all his barons then came to the hall. The swindlers held their arms up as if they held something in their hands and said, these are the trousers, this is the coat, and here is a cloak, and so on. They are all as light as a cobweb, and one must feel as if one had nothing at all upon the body, but that is just the beauty of them. Indeed, said all the courtiers, but they could not see anything, for there was nothing to be seen. Does it please your Majesty now to graciously undress, said the swindlers, that we may assist your Majesty in putting on the new suit before the large looking-glass? The emperor undressed, and the swindlers pretended to put the new suit upon him, one piece after another, and the emperor looked at himself in the glass from every side. How well they look! How well they fit! Said all. What a beautiful pattern! What fine colors! That is a magnificent suit of clothes. The master of the ceremonies announced that the bearers of the canopy, which was to be carried in the procession, were ready. I am ready, said the emperor. Does not my suit fit me marvelously? Then he turned once more to the looking-glass, that people should think he admired his garments. The chamberlains, who were to carry the train, stretched their hands to the ground, as if they lifted up a train, and pretended to hold something in their hands. They did not like people to know that they could not see anything. The emperor marched in the procession, under the beautiful canopy, and all who saw him in the street, and all out of the windows, exclaimed, Indeed, the emperor's new suit is incomparable! What a long train he has! How well it fits him! Nobody wished to let others know he saw nothing. for then he would have been unfit for his office or too stupid. Never emperor's clothes were more admired. "But he has nothing on at all," said a little child at last. "Good heavens, listen to the voice of an innocent child," said the father, and one whispered to the other what the child had said. "But he has nothing on at all," cried at last the whole people. That made a deep impression upon the emperor, for it seemed to him that they were right, but he thought to himself, "Now I must bear up to the end." And the chamberlains walked with still greater dignity, as if they carried the train which did not exist. The end. Fairy Tales of Andersen by Hans Christian Andersen, translated by H.P. Paul, 1872. Chapter 1. What are we arguing about? The problem. Because I love my friend Cara, I would like nothing more than to be able to celebrate all her achievements and all her joys. Unfortunately, there is a belief that we do not share, a fundamental value that divides us, an issue which Cara and I both believe is very important. This issue is whether or not it is morally right to engage in homosexual sexual relations. In the following chapters, I will set out the reasoning for my understanding of the nature of sexual relationships in general, and homosexual sexual relationships in particular. I want each person who reads this book to see this issue for what it is, in all of its complexity. This issue has boundaries that no one on either side is willing to cross. Make no mistake, taking either side of this issue will cause you to alienate someone. Often the person you alienate will be a close friend or family member. This issue is dividing society. It is dividing political parties. It is dividing friendships, and it is dividing families. Is it morally right for two people of the same gender to have sex? This question must be answered by each thoughtful individual, and no talking point or cliched slogan should persuade you one way or the other. To find the truth, we must work through the evidence. We must use reason, and in the end, we must stand by our informed consciences, regardless of where the issue stands in popular opinion. If the emperor is naked, we must be willing to say so, no matter the consequences. A charge often brought against people who take issue with homosexual sexual activity is that these people are ignorant, intolerant, and hateful. This group is compared to those who opposed granting civil rights to people of diverse ethnic groups, an issue I will deal with later in this book. Let me be very clear, so that there is no misunderstanding. I do not hate people who engage in homosexual sex. Neither am I ignorant, uneducated, or secretly struggling with repressed homosexual desires. Normally, I would ignore such accusations. Objections like these are attacks on me as an individual, rather than honest confrontations of my ideas. Although I am not a bigot, the ideas I present would be no less true or false even if I was. These ideas are either correct or they are not. My character has nothing to do with it. Attacking me personally will not convince a reasonable reader that my argument is necessarily wrong. Let me explain what I mean by introducing you to George and John. These two fellows will be with us at different points throughout the book to help me explain some of my points. George: I have reviewed the evidence, and I have concluded that stealing is wrong. John: But George, everyone knows you are a bigot and a hateful conservative evangelical Christian. Therefore, you cannot possibly be correct in your conclusion. George: It is true that I am an evangelical Christian, but you will need to prove that I am wrong by providing an argument that is better than my argument. Simply attacking my character does not prove that my conclusion is false. In the same way, a charge of hate and bigotry against me does not prove anything about whether the arguments I make here are correct or not. Some may argue that I not only have a character flaw, bigotry, but because of that character flaw, I have a bias. While I disagree about the particular character flaw, I readily admit a bias. That is to say, I believe, and believe strongly, in the truth of the statements I have written in this book. That does not mean I have not given these issues critical thought. Every reader is likely to have a bias as well. That is to be expected. All I ask is for each reader to subject the ideas of this book to critical thought. Try to analyze what you read without determining that these ideas are incorrect before you give them a chance. You are free to assume beforehand that all of my ideas are incorrect, so long as you confirm your assumptions by giving these ideas fair thought. Because it may be important to some readers, I will address the issue of bigotry. I love people, I love people who practice homosexual sex. I love all people, period. It is from love, not ignorance, fear, or hate, that I have written this book. Jesus of Nazareth said that all the law and the prophets could be summed up in the two greatest commandments, that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our hearts, souls, and minds, and we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. Matthew 22:37-40. I believe what Jesus Christ said is true. Because I believe this, I must try to be obedient to these great commandments. First, I must love God. In order to do that, I must speak the truth. I cannot claim I love God and refuse to speak the truth. If I believe the things I write here are true, I cannot neglect to write them because of fear of what others may say about me, or even because of fear that I may hurt the feelings of others. It does not matter whether the things I write about upset my wife, my children, my parents, my siblings, my friends, my enemies, or me. I must do what is right. This does not mean I should write the truth without doing my best to present that truth in love, compassion, and humility. I must present these ideas with love because to love God also means to love His creation. All those who read these words are His creations, who He loves awesomely. I do not want to hurt anyone. I only want to help my readers by trying to write and live out truth. The truth about right and wrong must be searched for, found, and obeyed. Sometimes we may be called to suffer for the sake of truth. I suffer now because my relationships with Cara and others cannot be complete because of our beliefs. Make no mistake, it is not only people who believe homosexual sex is morally right who suffer. Those of us who love them and disagree suffer too. In addition to loving God, I am called to love my neighbor as myself. All people are my neighbors. I am called to have the kind of love for each person that I want for myself. Of course, it must be the kind of love I want for myself when I'm at my best, not my worst. I ought to treat others as I would like to be treated, but not in the way I would want to be treated when I'm at my most self-absorbed. When I am in that state, I would like everyone to leave me alone in my immorality, so I can continue to harm myself and do things my own way. I must love in the way I would desire for myself when I am not thinking selfishly. The kind of love that would require my neighbor to hold me accountable, to be the best I can be, to do right and live in righteousness, to sacrifice my desires that are incorrectly focused and disordered, and to train my desires to aim at truth, justice, mercy, and humility. I would not want anyone to treat me with less love than that, and I intend to treat my readers with that kind of true love. The truth is, I do desire Cara's happiness, but not at any cost. I want to live at peace with her, but not at any cost. My desire for Cara's happiness is secondary to my desire for her spiritual and physical well-being. To be well is more important. It is much higher than to be happy. Happiness is an emotion I hope everyone may feel frequently, but when the feeling is present for the right reasons. But I want Cara and others to have true joy. True joy comes only through true fulfillment, and that is something that only comes from a life surrendered to the truth. Sometimes showing love can cause pain, but there is a difference between causing harm and causing pain. It may be painful for a child to be physically jerked out of the way of a bus, but no reasonable person would spare the child that pain and allow her to suffer the true harm of being struck by the bus. Some pains are necessary to keep us safe from true harm. Sometimes loving your neighbor means causing him pain. I would not want my neighbor to act as though something I was doing was right or good or even acceptable if, in fact, what I was doing was none of these. I want to be spared the flattery, the social scruples, and the fake kindness this type of love shows. I want to be told to my face when I'm aimed in the wrong direction. And if my neighbor could do so, I would want to be pointed in the right direction. That is what I propose to do in this book. I want to love my readers by pointing them in the right direction. Now notice how some of you flinch at that last paragraph. Terms like arrogance and vanity come to your mind as you describe the author of those words. Who am I to suggest that I could know what is right for anyone else? Who am I to suggest I could correct someone and point him in the right direction? I warn you to examine those emotions and analyze your thoughts because some of you are doing the very same thing. As you react to those words, some of you are doing exactly what you are condemning. You believe I am wrong to assume I can know what is right for other people. You believe I ought to think differently. In other words, you believe you know what is right for me. Whether what you believe about me is correct or not, you cannot believe those things and be fair. If you believe I was wrong to write that paragraph, you must think it is okay to believe someone is wrong. If it is okay for you to believe I am wrong, it is okay for me to believe other people are wrong. In fact, I am going to state that certain behaviors are wrong, objectively wrong. That is to say, they are wrong at all times and in all places, no matter how anyone feels about them. These ideas may be hard to tolerate. You may not like to read what I have written, but please do not abandon this book because you are offended that I am so arrogant as to assume I can know what is right. Because if you are honest with yourself, you also think you know what is right. It is possible you would honestly say that you do not know what is right, and that no one can know what is right. If you do not believe you know what is right, hopefully this book will give you some basis upon which to discover the moral law that binds and frees us all. If you are certain you are correct, that no one can know what is morally right or wrong, you should have no fear in giving this book a fair reading. In the end, God will judge between you and me and him. And we will all be responsible for the things we believed, the things we rejected, and the things we refused to give a fair read. I want those who struggle with the issues in this book to know the truth, to be free, and to have joy, not to feel condemned. I want to bring hope, not judgment. I am not rejecting anyone. We are going to look at this issue and the arguments made in favor of homosexual sexual activity, starting with what the Bible says about homosexual sexual activity. Please do not at this point think that this book is going to be all about the Bible. Most of what is written in this book is not based on Bible verses, but rather on things we can all relate to, Christians and non-Christians. Then we will look at the historical argument. We will go on to look at the issue from the perspective of natural law and objective truth. Finally, we will deal with the issue of what it means to be a homosexual and whether there are any alternatives to engaging in a homosexual lifestyle. There is hope. Great hope.
Pastor D. Roll.